Okay, Secretary Wright, if you want to go ahead and get us started.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time on Wednesday afternoon. Our Program Advisory Council set forth by the House Bill 1244. With this statutory authority, we have been given a purpose and objectives, and we have to be mindful of those objective purpose, but eventually making the process transparent, easier, collaborative, something that advances the interest of the students, state, and institutions. So with that, I give it to you, Dr. Dow.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a bit to cover in the next hour, but I imagine this will be a fruitful discussion. First and foremost, I'd like to just walk through a roll call and make sure we have everybody here who has been appointed to this council. So if we could just run down and you can say that you are here. Chancellor Perman?
Here.
Great. Dr. Phillips?
Here.
Great. President Power?
Here.
Great. President Wilson?
Dr. Wilson is unable to join us. He's in Indianapolis at a Lumina meeting and asked me to sit in as his representative.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Yep. And that's Dr. Keys for the record, Dr. Phyllis Keys. Thank you, Dr. Keys. President Jordan.
Hi there, everybody. Dr. Jordan is similarly out of town today, so I am here on her behalf.
Great. Can you state your name and title?
Yes, it's Brandon Engel, Director of Government Affairs.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Then we have President Anderson. She on? Or a proxy for President Anderson? Nope. Okay. President Ginsburg?
Here.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Ward?
Here.
Great. Dr. Van Dolman? Our provost from UMBC? Not here. Okay. President Willis? Or someone in President Wilson's stead from Howard Community College? Nope. Okay. President Williams?
Here.
Great. Dr. Dreyer? No, Dr. Dreyer. Okay. Dr. Milner? No, Dr. Milner. Okay. Moving on. President Yam? Nope. Okay. President Jaskin?
I am here, but I am not at Hood. I'm at McDaniel.
Oh, goodness. I am so sorry for that oversight.
No problem.
Thank you. We'll get that corrected. Provost Kange?
I'm here.
Great. And Provost Meyer Lee?
I'm here. There's an E before the Y in my last name.
Oh, goodness. I am so sorry. We will get these edits corrected. My apologies for that. And then I did just see President Willis join, correct?
That's correct. Good afternoon.
Great. Thank you, President Willis, for joining us. And then we do have a handful of visitors who are here to observe and listen into this meeting. Great. I do want to walk us through the bylaws for this advisory council so that you are all aware of the structure for these meetings, who should be part of these conversations. You should have received these bylaws in advance of today's meeting. Our commission, the Maryland Higher Education Commission, approved these bylaws back in July. And first and foremost, this is an advisory council to advise the commission on matters related to academic program review processes. The processes, the definitions, the criteria for our analyses. We will now run any of those proposed changes through this council before it would go to the commission, for you all to weigh in as senior leaders on the campuses on how we go about handling a variety of issues when it comes to new academic program proposals, changes to existing academic programs, and the like. We do ask that the council members solicit input from a variety of individuals who work with academic program proposals. So not just thinking through your own professional perspective, but representing the perspectives from that of your institution, as well as the perspective of that from your segment. So thinking through talking to faculty, department heads, deans, academic program directors, your governing boards, and individuals who are employed at schools who are not currently on the rotating membership roster. That's when we want to make sure you have a touch point with other segmental representatives for these conversations. I won't go through these, all of this, but I do want to highlight, we just went through the membership list. There are permanent members on this council. Those permanent members are what we consider our segmental leaders. So the chancellor, the president of the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, the president of the Maryland Independent College and University Association, the president of Morgan, and the president of St. Mary's. Certainly those individuals can send designees as appropriate, and we can work through that on a meeting by meeting basis. Those are permanent standing positions based on the people serving in those roles. Additionally, we have a number of rotating members. And so we've divided this by segment. So from the senior public higher education institutions, 2 presidents, 2 provosts. From the community colleges, similarly, 2 presidents, 2 provosts. From the private nonprofit institutions, 2 presidents and 2 provosts. And then finally, 4 individuals who may be faculty, department heads, deans, academic program directors, or coordinators, governing boards, or institutional attorneys from 4 other institutions not already represented by a president or provost. So bear with me. Let me walk you back to our current membership list. Those at-large representatives are currently vacant. We have a couple of nominations for these at-large representatives. And so we welcome additional representatives for these slots. We do want to emphasize 2 things. One, we are looking for representatives that go beyond the senior leadership on the campuses. So again, department heads, faculty, deans, program directors, even somebody from a governing board. We also welcome institutional attorneys because we all know that your attorneys may get involved in some of these discussions. So we would appreciate having an attorney representative on this council. So please do send us those nominations. We will review them. And our expectation is that these at-large positions will be filled and identified before our next meeting. Does that all make sense? So let me stop there and see if there's any questions on items that we've already discussed so far. Going once, going twice. Okay, so first homework assignment is if you have a nomination for an individual for these at-large representatives. So I just discussed, we're looking for somebody outside of that senior leadership role. We're also looking for individuals not already from a campus not already represented by a president or provost. So we want that diversity. Please do at some point take a moment to walk through and read through the bylaws. There are some additional pieces of information that you should be aware of. The last thing that I do want to highlight is in our bylaws, our meetings will be recorded, and the recording of the meetings will act as the meeting minutes. We will post the recordings to our website, so I want to be upfront and clear that the discussions that we have here, this is a public meeting, it is a public body, and we will use the recordings to function as meeting minutes. If we do end up meeting in person, or if there is a potential that the meeting is not recorded, then we will do written meeting minutes in which the council will approve at the following meeting. Okay.
Can I ask a question on what you just said, Dr. Dow?
Please, Chancellor.
And I don't mean to imply anything by it. Are there any circumstances in which this body could go into closed session?
That is a good question. I don't believe so. My understanding, and I will turn to our AGs to weigh in on this. This body acts as an advisory council to the commission. So any voting items would be recommendations regarding actions that would go to the commission for formal adoption. So I don't foresee a time in which there would be a need for executive session, but let me see if our AGs have any thoughts on that or would like to share comments.
Good
Thank
afternoon,
you.
everyone. So Macadia, one of MHEC's Assistant Attorneys General. No, I don't. I'm going to double check just now, but I don't believe off the top of my head that any of the exceptions to the open meetings rule in the Open Meetings Act would apply to this particular body. You know, we're not discussing personnel or contracts or anything of that sort, and most of them are geared towards that. And in general, I can't see any reason why you would need legal advice in closed session. So like I said, I'll double check, but I don't think any of the exceptions will apply.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Any other questions, comments? Some ground rules on how this will all function. Okay. With that, let's spend some time going into the meat of our first item, which is really talking about the draft analysis for unreasonable duplication. As noted in our meeting agenda, we provided an initial discussion, initial presentation at our October 23rd commission meeting. There's a recording of this presentation and discussion. It runs for almost an hour. And if you haven't had a chance to review it, that's okay. We strongly encourage you to do that. And you have that link there in the meeting minutes. We also have provided you with the slides that accompany that presentation. And let me turn over to those slides and in fairly quick order, try to hit the highlights of what we are thinking for unreasonable duplication. One more thing before I jump into that. This is a draft. The purpose of this advisory council is to provide feedback to our agency, to me as staff, for me to then take back to the commission. This is just a first look at what this analysis could look like. I just want to emphasize over and over and over again that this is draft and we welcome feedback. For some of you, this may be the first time you're seeing this, and we get that. So we also want to give you some space to think about this between now and the next meeting. We are not making any decisions in today's meeting, and depending on how today's discussion goes, we will figure out the agenda for the next meeting. So that's all to say this is introductory and draft and something for you all to respond to. In our presentation to our commissioners, we clarified some recent statutory changes to these terms. Previously, as some of you may be familiar with, the law indicated unreasonable program duplication, which would cause demonstrable harm to another institution. A recent bill, House Bill 1244, changed that language and is now unreasonable program duplication, which would cause harm to the state or students attending institutions of higher education in the state. So there's a lot to unpack there, something to keep in the back of your mind as these conversations continue, but that is important changes in the language. Similarly, the law previously said violation of the state's equal education opportunity obligations under the state and federal law. Now it reads unnecessary program duplication in violation of the state's equal education opportunity obligations. The important distinction here is it pulls out unreasonable duplication and separates it from unnecessary program duplication. For the purpose of this discussion, we are only going to focus on unreasonable program duplication. The task at hand is to figure out the criteria and the analysis that would accompany that criteria to determine if there is unreasonable program duplication, which would cause harm to the state or students attending institutions of higher education in Maryland. So again, our task here is to figure out the criteria and the accompanying analysis to determine if unreasonable program duplication exists. I'm going to skip a few slides here and talk through what I'd like to spend our time is what we have presented as draft general rules for unreasonable duplication. So let me walk you through this. I think we have 8 of them in these slides. These are kind of rules to work around. And once again, draft. 1, unreasonable program duplication does not exist unless the 2 programs are at the same degree or certificate level. So for example, a bachelor's degree may not be considered duplicative of an associate's degree. An upper division certificate may not be considered duplicative of a bachelor's degree, so on and so forth. So just setting a ground rule there that unreasonable program duplication does not exist unless the 2 programs are at the same degree or certificate level. Rule number 1. Second rule, unreasonable program duplication does not exist if the development of a new program or discipline is identified as needed to meet a state or regional workforce shortage through the annual appendix of the State Plan for Higher Education. So if there is a demonstrated need through our annual workforce shortage analysis, then a proposed program would not be considered unreasonably duplicative. So there's a demonstrated workforce need. Rule number 3. Unreasonable program duplication is most likely to exist within specialty programs, subdisciplines, professional degrees, and occupational specific degrees. This is trying to get at the idea of core liberal arts programs, particularly at the undergraduate level, that one could argue every college and university should offer. And so the purpose of this rule is to separate and state, really we care about duplication in the context of specialty programs, professional degrees, and occupation-specific programs. Fourth draft rule. Duplication is presumed to not exist if an existing program is basic, common, or a core program at a particular degree or certificate level. So again, are there some core programs that every college and university should be able to offer? We will have to figure out what that means, what a core program looks like. The one that often is discussed is, should every college be allowed an undergraduate business degree? Business degree is very common these days. Should that be allowable? Should we not consider that duplicative? Something to think about. Fifth draft rule. Because every community college in the state serves a different region of the state, duplication of an associate's degree program, a lower division certificate, or other academic program at one of the community colleges is not unreasonable. So in some ways, this would be a carve out for the community colleges and particularly our lower division certificates and associate's degree programs at community colleges. That we would expect duplication because what the mission of a community college is to serve their immediate region. 6, at the bachelor's degree level, basic, common, or core programs in the liberal arts, social sciences, theoretical sciences, business, and education are not unreasonably duplicative. This is another way or another rule to think about, are there programs with specificity that all undergraduate institutions should be able to offer? Again, we'd have to create a list and a definition of what it means around basic, common, or core programs. And we'd have to have that as an open, this body would review that list and come up with the definitions. Duplication of master's degrees, post-baccalaureate certificates, and graduate certificates. Common programs in the traditional liberal arts, social sciences, and theoretical sciences are also not unreasonably duplicative. So the distinction between 6 and 7 is 6 is at the bachelor's level. 7 is there space in which, particularly at the master's level, anybody offering master's level programs, there should be some core, it's not unreasonably duplicative. This is something that should be generally offered at our colleges and universities. Again, we'd have to come up with definitions. We'd have to think through that. And then finally, all proposals for doctoral degrees shall be reviewed for unreasonable duplication. There's no exceptions. There's no space. There's no core programs at the doctoral level. We would say, nope, we have to review all of those proposals for unreasonable program duplication. I think that's it. Yep, eight rules. There's more in this presentation, but considering we only have a few minutes in today's meeting to kind of get into the weeds of this, we thought we'd just start with the draft general rules and give you all an opportunity to respond to these rules and open it up for broad discussion. So let me stop there and open it up for discussion. Chancellor.
Again, thank you. And I have a few questions. One, earlier in the list of rules, there appears to be clarity that the process, everything we're discussing, is really focused on graduate programs, master's programs, doctoral programs. And yet there is so much language in the subsequent rules you reviewed that refer to undergraduates, whether at the associate degree level or in a bachelor's program. That confuses me immensely. Maybe nobody else, but it confuses me. If what's going on at the undergraduate level is off the table, if you will, why so much about it? That's number one. And if I may, let me just add another question that is different. And I want to deliberately choose my words carefully because I'm not trying to create controversy. There is language in 1244, language which I was pleased about, that emphasizes collaboration. So that hopefully there's, and this is said respectfully, very little work for the commission to do ultimately around program duplication. I'm not asking to debate that now, but I think what you said, Emily, is that we're going to focus specifically as a council on these 8 proposed rules you brought up. Does that mean we don't have the liberty to discuss other aspects of program duplication in terms of this charge?
Great questions. Thank you, Chancellor. So let me take the first one around undergraduate degrees. We receive objections On all types of programs, we have received objections at the associate's degree level. We have absolutely received objections at the bachelor's level. We've received objections on certificates. So it is within the realm to talk about all the variability of types of programs that are offered in the state of Maryland and whether or not we need to conduct an analysis of unreasonable duplication in those circumstances. So these draft rules are intended to highlight scenarios in which it may not be appropriate for us to even consider associate's degrees to be unreasonably duplicative of one another.
All right, so
So
it's
that,
we need to discuss. I understand.
yeah, so that is why that is included in there. To your point on collaboration and perhaps I chose my words poorly. The discussion today on these draft rules is just for the purposes of discussion. This council can make recommendations and we will put it on record and present those to the commission as appropriate on a variety of issues around academic program review. So Chancellor, what I am hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is in these draft rules, you do not see a rule on collaboration, and maybe we should create a rule, a draft rule, draft guiding principle, draft, an element here that emphasizes, encourages collaboration. Am I hearing that that is maybe something you would like to see?
Well, in a broader way, what I'm saying is I want, at least for me, and I hope for my colleagues, to clarify the limits of our charge. And I, for one, don't want to be limited to just the matters reflected in these rules, because I think there are important things to discuss in terms of the intent of the process, whether in terms of fostering our working together, we actually have created a very divisive process. So I'd like this to be an open conversation with your counselors going wherever we want. And however we need to set that down, assuming the secretary agrees, I think we should.
Understood. So we can certainly make sure that that is incorporated in future meetings, and that is a primary tenet of this work and the council's work. Yep.
Appreciate your answers.
Thank you. President Power.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dow. I'm just building on the Chancellor's comments. I think it would be probably helpful for the group to have a sense of how many times we're going to meet before we're putting something in front of the commission, because I agree with his concern. I obviously feel like there's a lot more than the 8 rules for us to sort of get into. And so having some sense of the timeline, I think, would be helpful so that we don't dive too deep on certain things and not deep enough on others that we'll get into later. And then with respect to the rules themselves, I did find it striking that there's 5 or 6 rules of what is not going to be unreasonably duplicative, but then one that is gearing in saying these types of programs are more likely to be unreasonably duplicative, which doesn't seem necessary if you're highlighting all the other things that will not. So with that, I'll take your answer on the first part. Thank you.
Sure. No, and thank you for your comment. At the end of today's agenda, we do have about 10, 15 minutes reserved to talk about a standing cadence for these meetings, particularly into 2025. And you're all very busy people. So we do need to kind of figure out kind of a standing meeting schedule. So if we can hold that discussion to the end of the meeting. Right now, we are envisioning that this would be monthly, at least for the next 12 months. There is quite a bit of work and quite a bit of a number of topics that the advisory council really should opine on and weigh in on. First and foremost is this issue of unreasonable duplication. And again, narrowing in the criteria and the analysis around unreasonable duplication, when it should be applied, and how the agency and staff go about applying it. So this isn't the first time we're going to be talking about this. We probably will have several meetings into the early part of 2025 to get into the weeds of unreasonable duplication. Similarly, we'd like to bring other topics to this group. One would be the letters of intent process and what that looks like. We will be presenting an initial draft process to our commissioners. And again, it will be the same format. They're going to get just an initial draft. We're going to bring it back to this group for us to pull it apart, figure out what makes the most sense, and then take it back to our commissioners. So letters of intent is another topic that we will need to address with detail. And a third immediate topic that we need to address is online program proposals that are considered fully online and targeted for a national, and I'm using the wrong words, but a national market. This is part of House Bill 1244, but that is also on the docket for this advisory council to weigh in on and create a process for fully online programs that are intended to enroll primarily out-of-state students. So there's a lot of work to be had here in terms of program review and those specific elements, particularly charged from House Bill 1244. Does that answer your questions? Great. Okay, so we'll hold this idea of scheduling towards the end of the meeting to figure out how we're going to go about getting a cadence of meetings.
Can I take just a minute?
Please.
To first, let me first say that I completely agree with Chancellor Perman's suggestion. What Dr. Dow has presented, things that must be done in order to implement the bill. And we have different deadlines for different parts that we have to share that with General Assembly and show the progress. So that are necessary things that must be done. But anything else that this body thinks is appropriate, everything can be considered here. And collaboration is certainly an idea that we have to look at it, making sure that academic programs are available to students across the state, and also making sure that state resources are appropriately used. So collaboration in creation of the program could be one possibility. Collaboration on using resources at various institutions could be that possibility. Collaboration in offering programs could be a possibility. There are models across the country where that's done. And certainly everyone is interested in a more more inclusive process and less competitive environment. Let me tell you that I'm more interested than anyone else in seeing that happen. And President Power's suggestion about timeline is also important. But we can't take forever to bring the changes, right? This has been going on for a while, and I see a lot of opportunities, especially with your guidance, to make this process better. So we'll have to work hard and move expeditiously. Thank you, and I see a lot of hands up. President Ginsburg was, in my opinion, the first one.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thank you for those comments. And let me say at the outset, I think this does advance the conversation and will advance the process. And I agree with the Chancellor that collaboration should be an essential feature and a component of what we do. And Sanjay, what you just said made one of my initial points, but I want to speak to three of the parameters specifically. And one thing you just suggested is that there are best practices that exist in this space. And being able to better understand what some of those best practices are and how some of those best practices might morph together with some of the challenges we face in Maryland, I think would be wise to think about. So three specific comments, and Emily, thank you for your hard work on this as well. First is on they're numbered here, number 2, with respect to the annual appendix of the State Plan for Higher Education. I'd like to at least raise the issue of that document and how that works, because I think it would be very important through this process to think not just where there are shortages today, not just where the imperatives might have been yesterday, but what the future holds. And my understanding is that document is really very present, focused, historically linked, but may not be as contextually driven by where fields are going. We said this morning during discussion we had that 3 years ago, if you would have considered the import of AI in jobs, it probably wouldn't even been on the table. So to think in a more forward way, because the notion of unreasonable duplication, that question of reasonableness has to be embedded within not just a current analysis, but a future analysis as well, point one. Point two is the duplication is presumed not to exist if it's, I'm sorry, it's number three. I'm looking at number four on my screen here, around professional degrees and specialty programs and subdisciplines and the like. There will be significant duplication in some of those programs by dint of accreditation. And I think we've got to really understand at a deep level both the role of accreditation, what we're willing to in Maryland accept with respect to accreditation, where accreditation, particularly specialty program accreditation, I don't mean college or university accreditation, I mean specialty program accreditation, not states, where that, and I don't think this statement contextualizes that to the degree that I think sufficiently is required. And my last point, if I make one more quick one, is number 8, that all proposals for doctoral degrees shall be reviewed for unreasonable program duplication. I think that's a conceptual issue that probably merits more conversation. I'm not sure personally I agree with it, because I don't think duplication necessarily is the coin of the realm. I think there's some other factors that need to be considered, and size of program, scope of program, importance of program. Duplication is one metric, but I would contend that the duplication criteria that we've used in Maryland forces us in many ways to train the workforce of yesterday, not to really train the workforce of tomorrow. And I believe that this process gives us an opportunity, perhaps unique over the last couple of years, to think prospectively, not just at the present or retrospectively, but to think prospectively about creating a workforce development program through our colleges and universities that are exemplary for the nation and repositions Maryland, not as a net exporter of talent as we are now, but keeping talent here because those are the jobs of the future. So I'll stop there and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, President Ginsburg. Those are all great comments and noted, and we can revise some of these rules to reflect some clarity language and maybe spend some time in a future meeting digging a little deeper on some of these topics. Thank you. Dr. and is it Dr. Gange?
Gange. Like the river without the S.
Thank you. I apologize.
That's okay. Thank you. So I wanted to follow up on Mark's comments, say a few words about graduate programs and PhD programs. I think you all know, these students are an essential part of the research mission, both here at Johns Hopkins as well as, many other schools on this call. And our now unionized PhD students are, particularly expensive and represent a considerable investment that the university is making with institutional or research funds. I want to, build on Mark's point that the recruitment of these students and our workforce outlook for these students is not Maryland, right? It is national and global in scope. Right? When we aim to recruit these students, we want them to come to Baltimore, of course. We'd love them to stay in Baltimore, but we really do look globally. We've worked hard to secure financial aid for these students, and we are well aware that certain key industries that may not be in Maryland, such as the national laboratories, are eager for our graduates and in sufficient need for new doctoral students. So given a national global workforce, it's hard to assess what the basis for an objection to program duplication is, and a presumption of denial for these programs given this evidence base. So I really think that needs to be taken into account. As Mark said, PhDs often identify new fields, are looking forward instead of back. I think this contributes to essential parts of the workforce here in Maryland. We really believe in choice for students across the many great universities that are here in Maryland. And that's partly why we have not issued any objection to any program in recent memory. So I really think these issues need to be discussed and taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dow. I'll take just a minute. Thank you, Dr. Ganges for the suggestion. I was born on the river banks of River Ganges, so I'm more used to seeing Ganges. So, but thank you for the comments. We will have to be but clear. National labor market, state labor market. But when we say national, which one? Because sometimes there are different data. One will say there's no need. The other will say, oh, there is tremendous need. So we will have to avoid some confusion there. The other workforce for tomorrow, our own state, our commerce has identified certain industries that are going to be significant going forward. That's quantum technology, aerospace, quantum computational biology. Those are the emerging areas. We have to see how we can bring them into program approval process. But I will also say that today our commission passed a new regulation about program modification. You can change your program 50% without coming to Maryland Higher Education Commission. So artificial intelligence, quantum computing, suppose these are emerging fields. Every computer science program should include AI, should include machine learning, and Maryland Higher Education Commission shouldn't be in the way. So I like to see, we don't want to see programs for every field that we hear. Data science, well, we have degrees in statistics, 50%. Most data science programs are not 70% different than a typical statistics program, right? So think about existing programs. How can existing programs be modified to look at the current market needs and emerging fields of our economy? Because that will impact students at a large scale. That makes our state significantly more competitive just by creating new programs are important. But just by creating new programs, we will not be competitive if we don't do anything with the existing program. How do we create value for every program that we have by looking at this regulation that our commission unanimously passed today? So I will say look at that side also while we are looking at new programs.
Thank you, Secretary Ryan. President Yam.
Thank you, Dr. Dow and Dr. Rye, for your leadership. I'd like to see us discuss, too, the prioritization and identification of determinants for collaboration to get some parameters around that concept and see how we can move that forward. And also to identify specific criteria, and we've touched upon this with my colleagues have already brought us into that discussion of program duplication. What determines that program duplication, I believe still needs a little bit more clarity. And also how we apply those criteria consistently across all our institutions and programs. Thank you.
Thank you, President Yam. Dr. Ward, Provost Ward.
Thanks, Emily. And if I could just follow up on President Yam's comments as it relates to defining duplication. I don't know if it's clear in the bill, the legislation, as to who bears the burden of establishing and making the argument that a proposed program is unreasonably duplicative. By that, I mean, is it the institution objecting to the proposed program that has the burden, or is it the institution that's with the proposed program that has the burden of demonstrating that it is not duplicative. And that hasn't been clear, at least for me, for a while. And I think it is important that we clarify that so we understand who bears the burden in one direction or the other.
That is helpful feedback. And noted that we can include that in future iterations of this. President Jaskin.
Yeah, I think just tagging on to that, I agree with question 8, indicating that all proposals for doctoral degrees shall be reviewed for unreasonable program duplication. It's not clear to me by what metric, like is MHEC then the one that is making the determination, even though, you know, it isn't possible for you to have sort of the disciplinary expertise that you would need to make those assessments, given the variety of and proliferation of advanced degree programs. So I think just some clarity there about, you know, if that is sort of an automatic trigger, whose authority is sort of being used to make those determinations.
Sure. Thank you. That's helpful feedback to clarify roles and responsibilities. At the end of the day, this is an analysis in which our agency would be using to determine whether or not a proposed program is unreasonably duplicative. But to Dr. Ward's point, we do expect that an objection would follow this same analysis, and that proposing institutions would internally walk through the same analysis to combat any potential unreasonable duplication and adjust their program proposal accordingly. So it really is meant to be an open analysis that all parties would use, but at the end of the day, it is still the agency's responsibility to determine whether or not a proposed program is unreasonably duplicative.
So then just to clarify, that it would be possible then for MHEC to simply make that determination independently of any objection, even if no other institution, private or public, had an objection. MHEC may ultimately make an independent determination.
Correct. That is my understanding, but I will give it a moment to see if our AAG would want to correct me on that. We'll leave it at that. And we'll get clarity on that for a future iteration, but that is my understanding at this point. Okay, seeing that we are coming up to the hour, couple more things. There is a lot more in the commission presentation. I want to be very clear. Those draft ground rules is just one part of what we have presented as a model to work under when we talk about unreasonable duplication. So again, I strongly encourage everybody to listen in to that presentation, review the slides. There's more information in terms of criteria and the general process for which we would evaluate a program's proposal for unreasonable duplication. So please do take some time, because what we have discussed on these ground rules is just one piece of what is out there for consideration. So 2 things before we close out our meeting. First and foremost, are there any suggestions on how we get on a cadence of meetings so that we are not trying to go through kind of constant scheduling craziness? One option is that we and we don't have to pick it right now. What we can do is just do a quick electronic poll outside of today's meeting to find a consistent day. The second Wednesday of every month is when we are going to meet from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., something like that. That is one way that we could go about getting our meeting schedule set up for 2025. I am open to other ways to try to figure out how we get on a regular cadence. Let me open that up for discussion, for other suggestions, or if we just make a proposal for a couple of standing times on a monthly basis. Chancellor.
Well, I certainly support your suggestion that we try to come to a standard day and time. At least speaking for myself, I think that's helpful. I was a little anxious, Emily, about the fact that you gave as an example 8 to 10. 2 hours is a pretty significant ask. I recognize the idea that once we're together, maybe we're more productive, but did you intentionally signal us that you're looking at 2-hour meetings?
No, I mean, maybe that was a Freudian slip.
Maybe
but no,
it was.
I this is not my meeting by any means. This is our collective meeting, and open to suggestions. We can certainly keep it to 1 hour. Again, recognizing everybody here you're all very busy people, but also recognizing that an hour sometimes we can't get substantively into the weeds.
I will suggest 1 hour, but at the same time, I will also suggest that, like good students, we do our homework, read stuff, and come prepared, so we use our hour effectively, and also try to be at this meeting as much as possible. There will be conflicts given the high-level people who are here. But I believe for higher education, this is one of the very significant objective for us. So it will require our total attention. One more thing, I think what Dr. Roger Ward was saying, as I understood it, I mean, as we look at emerging areas in academics and markets, we'll see more interdisciplinary fields. And how do we determine duplication? Not unreasonable or not unnecessary duplication itself. We may want to think about some, involvement of experts in that determination. Right now, we do very well. We have very competent staff. But once in a while, there may be a situation where we will have to think about, the expertise beyond us, right? So we'll have to be open to that idea. And certainly this group will guide us on that as well.
Great. Thank you, Secretary Wright. 2 more comments. One is we did receive some written comments on the presentation from the October Commission meeting. I will circulate that out to this group so that you all have access to those written comments. And I expect that we will continue to get written comments. And again, this advisory council should take in all of that information as part of your consideration and deliberation. Finally, as we think through the next meeting, so what I will do probably tomorrow is send a request out to this group for preferences on a just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday basis, and see if we can come to consensus of, is it the morning, the afternoon, midday, what that looks like. And we'll collect that information and try to come up with a schedule for 2025. President Willis, go for it.
Yes, I'm just going to throw this out. I don't know if you're already doing it, but it would be extremely helpful, at least speaking for me, for the homework that we have to do and even the request for the calendar invites to include our assistants, just because I can miss things in my inbox. And I second or third the notion of 1 hour meetings.
Noted. Thank you. So in my email, I may very well request if there is a scheduling person, an assistant person, somebody who just helps you keep track of your life. We can certainly make sure that they are part of the distribution list, not necessarily your proxy. I think we kind of want to keep those two, but if there's somebody helping you with scheduling, we can certainly put that into our distribution list for context. My last request of this group, and we can take this offline, what topics how would you like to structure our next meeting's agenda? I can provide additional information on our current processes. I can provide another overview from the commission meeting. We can leave it just to open discussion. Are there any immediate knee-jerk reactions of how you want to schedule the next meeting's agenda? I hear you that you want to be clear about your charge. So what we can do is work to create a purpose for every meeting so that it's clear, okay, we're going to focus on this thing. This is what we're trying to get at for any particular meeting. So we have a clear purpose, but hearing no immediate responses on how to schedule on the agenda for the next meeting, we will make an attempt. We will get that out to you early enough so that you can provide feedback on it, and we will go from there.
Emily, one of the things that I'd love for us to talk about is this distinction between demonstrable harm to another institution versus harm to the state or harm to the student, because I think that, to me, the ability for students to have choice of the institution that they want to attend is very much, thinking about the care of our students and not causing harm to them, particularly in terms of transportation or the ability to access education. And so I guess just understanding why that change was made, the extent to which that is, for privates tied to Selinger funds, or what what are the under the actual operational changes that are likely to be made based on that change in language.
Noted. We highlight a little bit of that in the commission commission presentation, but we can certainly work to give that some dedicated time in this group's discussion. Okay, with that, I will turn it back over to Secretary Rye to close us out.
Thank you very much. Very, very successful meeting, excellent conversation. I feel very, very good about the possibilities in future. Again, thank you for your time, and we have taken notes and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.